Last man up tonight is Brent Smith from 2020 Building Inspections. He specialises in building pest inspections and pre-property inspections.
Yep.
So I'll hand over to Brent. Take it away.
All right.
There's the pointer.
Thanks, mate. Righto, so I'll try to keep you awake as best I can. This is like building stuff. Who likes building stuff? Really? Okay. Is that better? Yeah. All right. So I've got two little handouts here that I've the ladies up the back kindly helped me put out. Thank you, ladies. And the first one I just want to address tonight is essentially, a lot of people don't know what a building consultant is, and it's slightly different to just a building inspector or a building and pest inspector. There's a few other services that a building consultant can offer, and I've kind of made a bit of a speciality of doing these other things to help people out. And so if you look at the first handout, it's not the do-it-yourself one, we're getting to that. It's the first one. It basically, it lays out a few lists of services here. A lot of people in this group will do a development and they'll do a construction project, so they'll have to employ a builder. And so quite often my clients, they're not even in the state or the country, so they'll ask me to go out there and do their stage inspections and things like that for them. So I generally recommend 3 inspections if you go into a construction project. The first one is before you sign the contract. Not only do you need to talk to Russell about what you're getting yourself into and what rights you're signing away with the builder, but what I will do for you pre-contract is go to site, have a look at all of the stuff that's happening on site, where your manholes are, how much retaining work you're going to have, fencings, where the fences are, and just basically go over your site so that I can then cross-reference your documentation to what's going to happen on site. So by this time you've probably gone right up through the planning stage with the builder, and essentially you've got plans and what have you, and a contract and specifications, and we can sit down and we can look at that detail. So we usually attend site together, we run off and find the nearest coffee shop, and we go through all of the documentation to make sure that you've got everything planned out correctly. There's a whole process, and we want to make sure that the builder's thinking along that process and that it's all going to flow correctly. And when it comes to retaining work and things like that, sometimes you've got access difficulties as an example, and it's always handy to know, well, if you're responsible for the retaining work, they put a house in the way, how are you going to get in there and do your retaining work afterwards? It can cost a fortune. So we plan and we talk about that type of stuff. The second stage inspection I'd recommend isn't the footing or the foundations. We've got engineers for that, and everything gets certified. And we even have a certification for our frames. But I do recommend doing a frame inspection. Once again, I go out, I cross-reference the working drawings with what they've actually done on site. I tell people to do that just after the roughings are done. Quite often the brickwork will be up, certainly the roof, the gutters, fascias and all that will be on. But essentially I don't want to have a look at it once it's sheeted internally. There's no point going out there then. But the quality of your frame, if it's been left to sit in the sun for 3 months, it'll probably twist up and go bad on you. The quality of your frame will often determine the outcome of your end project. And it tells me a lot about how the progress of the job is working. So if the job's running along quite bumpily and there's problems and they haven't planned a lot correctly, you can often see that at frame stage. The other thing is we're looking at the building from a different perspective to, say, a certifier. I'm looking at other types of defective building work or methods that could have been done differently, or materials that could have been installed that should have been installed or haven't been installed. Does that all make sense? Mm-hmm. And then the final one is we must give the builder an opportunity to finish the contract. So what I then say is we do a handover inspection service. You've probably all heard of that, or a pre-settlement. So essentially, there's not a lot that you can do to delay the settlement of a building contract, and we've got to be very careful we don't remain in breach. However, we want to, once again, cross-check all of your documentation off against what the builder has actually completed on site. I don't generally want to go out there and comment on half-finished work, so if there's landscaping in the contract and what have you, we want them to finish completely all of that, so we can say, yes, they finished the fencing, the retaining work, the landscaping, the drainage is all set up correctly, and I can sign it all off and yet advise you then to pay the client, or pay the builder, and complete the contract. So that's all your pre-construction stuff. A consultant, not only do we do that advocacy work, obviously we deal with a lot of things where the client's expectations and the builder's expectations are slightly skewed, and that results in dispute. Quite often I'm asked to write reports for the QBCC so that they can make formal complaint, the client can make formal complaint about a builder, and I can also help negotiate with the builder on your behalf or the supervisor and resolve the issue so that we don't actually have to go through a complaints process. So it's another service that we offer as a building consultant. We then move on to, from the dispute resolution side of things, that we then move on to, once your building's finished, you've got certain mandatory home warranty insurances associated with your building. So for 12 months, if your contract was after the 14th of October 2014, you've got a maintenance period. And there's specific categories by which you can make claim on your insurance or expect the builder to come back and do rectification work to it. So I'm often asked to go back before that 12 months is up and make a list of all the items that I expect or that we would expect the builder has to fix. And then obviously if the builder's not forthcoming to help, there's complaints to be made to the QBCC and perhaps even documentation for QCAT and what have you, depending on what the matter is. So that's your warranty issues. I also do specific type inspection work. So if you've got a one-off type thing, it might be on an established building, it might be cracking, it might be roof leaking, it might be any manner of things that can go wrong. I can report on all of those things as well. Do a lot of work for body corporates and that type of stuff. So that I can prepare documentation for annual general meetings and all that type of stuff. So that's essentially what a building consultant does. A lot of you may not have been aware that service is even available. But the next handout that we're going to go through tonight is you do it yourself property assessment tool. I noticed the hands that went up here earlier tonight. There was about half the people haven't seen this presentation. I went, thank God. And then there's people like Laurie here who only watched me do this at another group a couple of weeks ago, so sorry mate, you can tune out now. This tool, I built this a number of years ago, and the idea of it was, I thought to my client and myself, you know, if I can get in front of people and I can give them something that they can take around when they're doing their property inspections, they're doing their open homes on a Saturday morning with their family and looking at all the different sites, they can take this tool with them, and they can run through this checklist, and come into an evening like this, the idea is I give you a little bit of education, I give you some live examples and some photographs, so that basically you've got a tool that helps you assess multiple properties very quickly. It doesn't take very long to do it, and I'm going to show you how simple it is right now. Yeah? Everyone on board with that? Okay. So, what have I got here? No. That's the old one. That's the new one. That's the disclaimer. Obviously, just get me out. Don't rely on doing it yourself. I'm not telling you to become a building and pest inspector. This will not make you a building and pest inspector tonight. It only takes about 8 years and lots of study. So, yeah, no matter what you learn here tonight, please double check all your facts through people that are licensed. And our licences are only covered, we are only given our licences if we remain indemnified or professionally insured. So we're giving advice, we have to have professional indemnity insurance. So it's very important people understand that as well. Yep, turned it off. There it is, sorry. Okay, some of my qualifications. I started life as a carpenter, went on to become a builder. Now I'm a licensed insured building inspector and a pest inspector. I've got a health card licence as well from the termite side of things and the pest side of things. If you turn to the first page of the tool here, you'll notice at the top it says the conditions of the site. So it's really important we assess the conditions of the site because they can have all sorts of impacts on the building and how it continues to move and flooding and seepage and termite attraction and all that type of stuff. So the first thing we want to do when we arrive on a site is basically look at the condition of the drainage. And the question here is, will the water fall towards or away from the house? And so what would everyone say about that? Away or towards? All right, so if you look at your first point here, there's two answers. It either goes towards the house or away from the house. Now, sometimes you look at stuff and it's kind of towards and away at the same time, and that even confuses me when I go to a site. I've got to assess that, and I kind of go always to the side of caution that, you know, that drainage isn't going to work, you know, major downpour and a deluge. So towards or away. But you'll notice one of the answers is underlined. The underlined answer is good. The not underlined answer is bad. Yep? Because at the end of this, we're going to add up all of the underlined answers and you're going to come up with a point score. And essentially that's going to tell you how it compares with the next property you go and have a look at when you go and ask the same questions of it. Does that make sense? Yep. So everyone can see the difference between water ponding and not ponding. Roof water, generally we want to see it go into a stormwater system. A lot of the older areas in Brisbane you won't have that, and it can be a real issue because water sitting around a house not only creates damp problems, creates slipping problems, creates rotting problems, but what do you think it attracts? Termites. Everyone here knows that, yeah? Water attracts termites to buildings. So it's one of the reasons we assess the drainage straight away. Is the water ponding there? Okay, so everyone's got the hang of this. What about this one? Now, this was my old house, so this is going to be perfect, of course. But you'll notice the water is falling towards the house, but what? There's a drain there. And what's at the end of the drain? No, there's a pipe there. And that pipe's coming from the roof, and all the water is going into the underground, and it's being directed away from the house. So even if the water's falling towards a building, if you've got good drainage, and it's being directed away from the house, that's good drainage. Does that make sense? Retaining work is another question we ask of our site or our property. Retaining work's really expensive to replace, and obviously it's supporting a body of earth. Quite often it will be structural. So going around and looking at the condition of your retaining work, whether it's timber, or whether it's brickwork, like in this case, masonry, rocks, if it's falling over, eventually someone's going to have to fix it, and if you own it, guess who the cost will go to? So, retaining walls, what do we think about the condition of that one? What do you think this guy's thinking? Holy shit, what am I going to do with that? Yeah, exactly right. So, I mean, eventually, they don't get better. I've never seen a retaining wall run down on a Saturday morning to Bunnings, get all the bits it needs, digs itself out, fixes it straight to itself. No, it doesn't happen. They just get worse and they just keep leaning over until eventually you've got to do something about it. The other thing we're looking at with our site is large plant life, trees and gardens and things like that. So obviously we've got an old stump in this section here, and this was a brick veneer house. Does everyone know what a weep hole is? Yeah? Weep hole is like a ventilation point around the base of your house. They put it around the first step of the house. And if we cover those weep holes, guess what gets into your building? Termites. And what else? Water. So, once again, we don't want to see gardens or anything up against our house. We want to see our weep holes clear, and we want to see the water falling away from the house. Will the water get away from that house? No. So the garden's obviously too close, and the water will get trapped between the deck and the house, and obviously that's going to create a problem for us. What about this one? Is this good? Based on what I just explained. Why not? Yeah. So there's a bit of a rule out there. Wherever the foliage system goes to, that's pretty much how far the root system can run. And I can tell you, underneath that house, there was all these old paths and stuff, and they were just all lifting up, and the stumps were all going like this, and the house was like this. This house was majorly affected by this massive tree, and obviously I put that in there as an example to show you what not to do. Gardens against houses again. Now, quite often what this is referring to is seepage into a building. So you'll notice here with this house, this was my old house again, this air conditioning, there was an office in this area here, and essentially the garden's being up against the house. When it rains, if we don't have correct waterproofing in place, the moisture will seep through the house. So waterproofing is a black tanking membrane that can generally be seen just above the external surface level. So we're always kind of trying to look for that if we've got areas outside higher than the areas inside your building. Yeah? So the question in there is external waterproofing evident? But the next question is are the outside levels higher or lower than the inside levels? Does that make sense? Yeah? Better if they're down below the inside levels. So that's essentially the end of your site drainage assessment. And so you'll see this is where we add up all our underlined answers. Each underlined answer gives you a point, and we do that for each section of the report. And at the end of it, we'll be able to assess whether the house is above average, below average, or just average. If we turn to the next section, you'll notice we're going now through the structural condition of the house. And once again, we're just going through and we're just answering some simple questions. We're going around, it's very methodical. When I get to an inspection, I usually start at the front door, and I turn left, and I just keep going around and around and around until I get back to the front door. And then I do the same when I go inside the house. I go into the house, I turn left, I just keep going around all the rooms until I get back to the front door. Then I don't miss anything. So it's kind of a methodical approach. We start from the foundations, and we just keep working our way up the walls to the roof or to the ceilings. Does that make sense? So the first one is here, do all the walls appear to be plumb and level? What's the answer to that? No. So that doesn't get a point. Cracking, obviously we're looking for blemishes and just general visual problems with the house. Now, cracking's a tricky one. Cracking can be assessed in 3 different ways. We've got what we call appearance grade cracking, then we've got what we call serviceable grade cracking, and then finally we've got like structural cracking. Cracking that's just obviously not operating as it was intended. Appearance grade cracking you'll see just about on every house. There's not too many that haven't got some sort of settlement or movement. But serviceable grade and structural grade cracking, the difference between those can be very, very subtle. So that's where you'll probably need a bit more of an expert eye. But your job, when you're using this tool, is just to go around and try to identify it. Take a photo of it. If you want to send it through to me, I'll tell you, good, bad, get an engineer, whatever. I can usually assess from there. But I might ask some other questions like, okay, if you've got crack into the brickwork, what other movement do you have? So it's all got to be assessed in reference. We want to see the significance of it in relation to the whole house. Are the doors and windows opening and closing? Is the tile work falling off the house? I'm going to show you some shots later of a really bad house with a lot of bad movement. But cracking, we're just trying to identify it at this point. What's that look like? Yeah, so that's the eave of a house. Obviously we've got some movement here. You'll notice the brickwork's no longer tight to the window frame. The mouldings have opened up and the house has heaved or cracked so badly that all the joints are pulling apart. The ceiling, the eave joints are falling apart. So, if you saw that, that's the type of thing we're looking at. So once again, as you go through the report, we start at the ground, looks at the wall, we're moving our way up the wall now to the eaves. We're going to look at the fascia boards next. Okay, that's an internal one. I've used an external one, but essentially we're going to open and close the doors of the house, and if you've got that kind of movement, obviously the door's going to be sticky, it's not going to close evenly and all that type of stuff. Fascia boards are next, where your gutter's attached to. You can notice gaps here. Once again, movement will affect all of that. And the other thing, of course, is the timber rot that we might get to timber fascia boards and things like that. So we're just going through and we're assessing the condition of each component or each building element. Is wall sheeting and or timbers in direct ground contact with the ground? What have we got there? Yes? And why don't we like that? Pardon? Termites? What else? Moisture, timber rot. So if you're planning on buying a house, and there's plenty of these in Brisbane, where they've been built in downstairs or whatever, if you've got timber and ground contact, that's a big no-no. We always kind of look at that and go, wow, we've got to be careful of that. What we want to see is the slab edge exposed, we want to see ant cappings, and we want to see the timber up out of the ground. That's ideal. So if we saw that, we're not going to get a positive remark. Remember I talked about weep holes? Can anyone see any little holes there? Oop, I'm going back, sorry. That one there? Okay, so the Australian standard says that we must keep the weep holes completely clear by 75 mil. So the outside surface levels should be 75 mil, which is one course of bricks below the bottom of the weep hole. Keep them clear, and that way we can see visually any access by termites into your house, but also water can't get into your building. Does that make sense? If water gets through the walls and what have you, or there's a flood inside, it can get back out those vent holes as well. So the whole thing is there ventilation purposes. Any questions? Anyone can interrupt me at any time. You're really...
What do you do in that scenario with things like that?
Yeah, dig the gardens out. And sometimes that's really complicated and difficult to do because you might be on the low side of the street and trying to create a fall. You might have to create then a spoon drain. Now, everybody here, we've got bobcats and excavators and truck removal and, you know, I've probably got power lines we're going to hit getting in there and access issues. All of a sudden it becomes very expensive. So this kind of works into your landscaping as well, so that you can have problems both with your landscaping and with the functionality of your building elements. Does that make sense? It's a good question. So feel free to jump in any time, guys. I'll do my best to answer as we go. Obviously, cracking to paths and things is another question. You know, there's an example near the pool. We've got the pool filter and equipment there. Cracking and movement like this can certainly affect underground drainage. That's very much a consideration. So we want to identify that. But it also creates a trip hazard, and people can stub their toes and things. And if you've got tenants moving into these places and they hurt themselves, they'll see you. So we don't want that for you. And then we're moving inside and we're looking for blemishes and things like that. Is that a good one? Everyone can see that, right? Like, this isn't rocket science. It's like visual inspection. We're just looking for blemishes and things that just don't look right. And everyone can see sags and ceilings and beams inside, that type of thing. Cracking to tiling, that's another one. Blemishes and just the general condition of your house. We've got rust spots, all sorts of things. That was underneath that vanity, and obviously it was leaking, and this was like a termite nest under here, and so the whole thing had problems because of the water, and you know, it was just an old house. It needed some repair. So when we have movement, we also have, you know, things pull away from walls that should be nice and tight. So we're looking for all that, and I'm moving through this pretty quick because I just know I'm going to run out of time. And essentially, you're just going through each of the questions and answering them. So the question here is, do kitchen and vanity bench tops fit tightly to walls? All the questions are laid out for you. You just got to tick it, find an answer to it. Doors, I'm sorry about that shot, that's my camera work. But essentially you can see that the paintwork's pulled away here, this house has moved and heaved, and obviously the doors and windows aren't opening and shutting correctly. So do all the internal doors close without sticking, or are they binding? What does the quirk look like? Is the gaps around the doors nice and even? Does that make sense? Yep. What would you do if you saw that in the house? No, you wouldn't. You put in a really cheap offer. You try to buy it for nothing. Maybe, I don't know, that might not be your thing, but essentially, you know, that's going to represent a problem. If you send me a photograph like that, I'm going to say get an engineer. I'm not going to even come out and have a look at it. I'm just going to say get an engineer. Now everyone can see the problem with that, please. Anyone that sees it, just put your hand up and tell me what it is. You've seen it before. Yeah, there's a tap in the electrical box. But they've capped it off, so it'll be sweet as a nut. Not. So, we're looking for basic safety things. I mean, if you saw wires hanging out of a wall, would you go up and say, oh, I wonder if that's light? Please say no. Please say you wouldn't do that. Yeah, if you saw hand railing that's really wobbly and in bad condition, obviously these are safety issues that we want to be aware of, because they need to be. Yeah, John?
No, I was going to say, yeah, no worries. The tap's capped off and it's got a safety switch.
It's got a safety switch. It can be sweet as a nut. No problems at all. Yeah. So, and that was the other thing I was going to talk about. The next thing is, does everyone know what a safety switch is? A residential currency device. And the idea is that if you've got an appliance inside the house that's got an earth leak, like a toaster or a hairdryer, and you touch it and there's no residential currency device, it'll go through you to earth and it'll kill you. So we put these little things on called safety switches, and how we tell what a safety switch is press the right button, is it's got a test device. It's got a little test switch here, and that is connected up to the circuit of your power points. So these other ones are circuit breakers. This one here is a safety switch, and that's what we want to see in every house. Every house should have it, and usually today we're wiring them up both light circuits and yes, power circuits.
Light circuits, they also have a light circuit for light.
Yeah. Look, the old buildings probably won't. You probably get one safety switch. The new buildings, we've got safety switches on everything. It's just mandatory now. Good question. The next section of the report, if we go to the last section, we're looking at more of the aesthetic condition. Now, we've been through the structural stuff, we've been through the site stuff and the retaining work and all that type of stuff, but I've seen buildings where the aesthetic costs can be as expensive as any structural work you can perceive. And there's a trick out there some real estate agents will use where they'll say you can only get out of the contract, they'll put a building and pest clause in, but then they'll put a special remark in there saying you can only get out of the contract if it's structural. And so be very careful of that, because I've seen houses that have got thousands of dollars to spend on aesthetic or things that are what could be perceived as non-structural. And then obviously there's a big debate about what's structural and what's not, because the gutters are quite often leaking and they will need replacing. You know, that could be perceived as water damage, and that's structural, but it's not structural. So you just don't want to get into a debate like that. I mean, at the end of the day, you want to have all your outs, as Russell pointed out before, and a clean building and pest outlook, I guess. So
Garden names now, isn't it?
yeah, look, that garden name, that would definitely be out. Anyway, the condition of the outside of that building, how's that looking? No good. What about that? That's water and what have you, that's no good either. And the condition of your fascia boards here all rotting away. Downpipes that are leaking. Once again, that'll mean that water's going to sit around the base of your building. Am I going too fast? Is everyone good? Once again, all these questions, they're just laid out. You just got to find yes, no. That's all you got to do. I don't expect that anyone's going to probably take a ladder with them like I do and get on the roof, but quite often you can stand back, particularly if the house is kind of on the low side of the street, and you can see the roof lines and things like that, and you can identify loose pointing and you know, the ends of the cappings of the tiles are not sitting right. You can see, you know, any lifting flashings and things like that. Just try to identify whatever you can. There's just a question in there about the roof condition if you can see it. Paint peeling, obviously, you know, we've got to perceive, you know, the costs associated with renovating that. And everybody here is in the market to buy a place where they can make some money on it. So this could be a gold mine if you can get it cheap enough, I guess. And then obviously, you know, things like rusting support posts. So we're looking at substructures. Going inside the house, once again, we start at the bottom of the building, or the floors, and we work our way up the walls. So the questions are relevant to what's the condition of the floor coverings. What about this one? What would you give that one? The question is, are wall coverings in good condition? Is it in good condition? Oh, I'm doing this.
It's a matter of opinion, really.
That's right, yeah. That's the answer. Exactly. Look, it's not my cup of tea, but I couldn't actually, in a building report, bag it because it's actually in good condition. Just nano-decorated it, that's all. So I threw that one in there as a bit of a laugh, but yeah, I think you get the drift. You've got to be fair and reasonable. You know, I can't go into a 100-year-old house where they had beam sizes this big. That's what they used to use in those days and say, oh, it doesn't meet the codes. We can't do that. We have to be fair and reasonable and have to judge each thing and make comparison based on the age and the era that it was built. Does that make sense? Yep. We've got a question. Thanks, Neil. Keeping me employed.
One thing is probably a little trap is with pools. Obviously with pools, if it's an existing pool, it doesn't have to be, for some reason it has to be certified by the owner, but once you buy it, then you'll have to get the certification done, so it always can be a trap, but not, because obviously in the contract there they can just state there's no certification on it. But once you buy it, it becomes an onus on you.
So my understanding is how the contract works, I'm sure Russ will be able to back this up, is that you can sign or waiver away your right and take responsibility for the pool certification. Now this is more in relation to the pool safety aspect, being the safety barrier. And in 2010, I think it was December 2010, they changed the rules to make all pools, whether they were old and 50 years old or brand new, comply to the same standards. Essentially, you must have, as you pointed out, certification or a safety certificate. Finish? No, not yet. A bit more. Sorry. Yeah, so safety certificates, they're mandatory, but it's not always the owner's responsibility. It can be passed on to the purchaser. and a safety officer is always recommended in my reports. I was a licensed safety officer. I threw the licenses in. There was no money in it, and everyone hated me, and I didn't like that. So I was telling people to smash all their trees and stuff down. But essentially, your pool safety must be considered. You know, you want to make sure your gates and catches, they're saving lives. Well, that was the idea of it. Cool. Then we go to the ceiling. So just moving through this a bit more quickly now. We've got water leaking here. That was a leak through into a walk-in robe from a bathroom where the tiling was like that. So we're going through the inside of the building and we're looking at all the different components and your wet areas and things like that. All the questions are laid out here. What do you think about that splashback? A bit of plastic, and obviously that was leaking. And we get to the end, once you've answered all the questions, and you add up all your underlined answers. At the end of the report, you've got, a below average house. If you've only got 10 underlined answers or less, it's a below average house. Obviously, it's got problems through each element that we've looked at here, your structural, your aesthetic, and your site conditions. If you get 11 to 29, it's probably going to be about middle of the range. And if you've got 30 to 35, you've probably got a really nice, clean-looking house. You've got to take it on its merits, though. You might be able to still get, above 30, but your site conditions were shocking. So you have to take each section into account as well. So I just point that out. And you can have some real costs in the site as well, we've discussed here tonight. So that's the end of your do-it-yourself assessment report. I encourage everybody to photocopy it, take 10 of them out on your open homes, and fill them out. If you've got questions, all my details are on here. Send me photographs. I'm happy to answer any questions you might have in the moment. And obviously, please, when you're ready and you've made a final decision on a property you think you want to go ahead with, get an expert, someone licensed with the insurances. To me, that's good. I'll help you out as well. So that's it. Yeah. In conclusion, get a building and pest inspector, and expect to pay around $500 for building and pest inspections. That's about the cost, depending on size. You'll probably get a little bit less if you're only buying a unit. You may not need pest inspection. I talked to one gentleman here tonight who's looking to buy a unit. You won't need a pest inspection on that. And a lot of people won't know that. They'll ring up companies and they'll go, yeah, we'll do a building and a pest. Going, yeah, you beauty. You just made $200 and we didn't even need to do anything. So I won't do that to you. And I will point out or emphasise the importance of doing a pest inspection. Termites are secretive and you've got to go and find them. You've got to know how to find them. You've got thermal imaging equipment and tap sticks and all that type of stuff. But getting in roofs. Now this was an 8-metre span on a girder truss. You can see it's a doubled up truss. It was taking tiled roof weight. And I climbed into the roof and I stuck my fingers through the side of it. And they were really destructive. That was right in the middle of the house. So they've come from the ground, up one of the outside walls, across the middle of the house and eaten Christ knows what on the way through. So we obviously had some major implications with that. And that's the reason you do building and pest inspections, to identify these issues. I didn't expect that you guys will always find that an issue like that, but that's what I do. So, thank you for listening to me. Putting up with it.
Very good presentation. Thank you for that, mate.
You want to do questions or not?
I think we're running out of time. We're going to have some time
I'll be up the
afterwards
back,
to meet around the back, but that's really awesome. And look, for me, as Sonny said earlier, property investing is a business. You're investing either a lot of your own cash or you're taking on debt to buy a property. For the cost of $500 to at least be aware of what you're getting, it's money really well spent. And if nothing else, there's stuff you're aware of, you can use that to negotiate a lower price with the agent or whatever. So I'd encourage you to use the services, and good prezzo, Brent. Thank you very much.
Thanks, guys. Appreciate you.
So good one.